Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session. I don't know where you are today, but if it's morning, good morning. If it's afternoon, hopefully you are getting ready to get out of here. And if it's night, thanks for joining me. I get people from all over the world actually attending these sessions. So today, what I want to do is walk through this idea of using behavioral AI to unlock new consumer insights and research actionability. And I'm going to introduce a new methodology that we've developed here at Mindstate Group called MindPath. Just so you know, you're going to get a free ebook that's going to explain a lot more about some of the ideas we have here today, specifically around using behavioral AI to increase the depth of your insights. We also are recording this session, so I will send you out the recording if you want to share that recording with anybody, or if you want to rewatch it on your great holiday schedule. If you're that bored to watch one of my meetings, that's awesome. But that's kind of what we're going to do today. I'm going to try to get you out of here just as fast as I can here. So with that, why don't we go right into it? And let me know whether or not this story relates to you or where you are with your business. I want to see how familiar this story is. So I came across this exact same story again and again this year with my clients. So basically what happened is they would tell a story and they said, okay, in 2021, we had this banner year, especially my CPG clients. We had this banner year, tons of revenues, profits were up because we had to raise prices. And then 2022 came and we started realizing we weren't making our revenue numbers. So we had to raise prices, but oh my gosh, this is great because all of a sudden we didn't have to worry about elasticity because wow, we raised prices and we really didn't lose that many customers. So then we went ahead and we found out that we started raising prices again in 2023. We couldn't meet that overlap. So once that overlap wasn't met, we raised prices again and we still lost customers, but we made our profit. So Wall Street was very happy with that. Then what we found out was that, okay, now it's 2024. We have to raise our prices yet again, but we're really worried because now we can't actually, we're scared that we're going to lose so many customers that we're not going to be able to make our profit numbers. So I heard this story again and again and again. And here's the idea. Inflation over the last 3 years has created this shopper reset. And we just can't go back to the old pricing, right? Our prices are set. These are what the CPG clients are telling me. So we have to figure out psychological value. So I did a lot of work in the world of psychological value this year and found out that there's actually a lot of academic work in this idea of what constitutes psychological value. And I was basically paraphrasing and borrowing some concepts from Chen's work here. But basically, to think about value impressions, there are 3 kind of very quick steps that happen. First step is that you have an objective perception, meaning you are introduced to this brand, you see a price, and within 1/20th of a second, there is a impression that's made. So this is an objective perception, usually anchored onto something. So that's in 1/20th of a second. And in that 1/20th of a second, there is an avoidance or an approach response, right? Something is, I get this initial feeling of, oh, that's good brand or a bad brand, or that's a good price or a bad price. So that happens in the first 1/20th of a second. Then there's this process called encoding. And encoding is where you bring psychology. Now that may be from the next kind of second all the way to 4 seconds, or maybe if it's a large purchase, it may be days, right? But there is some encoding happening. And for CPG clients, it's generally very quick, especially if you're at shelf. So there's this encoding process. And that's kind of looking at how am I going to judge this? What do I know about the brand? What are my perceptions and beliefs about the brand? And then lastly, there is this subjective feeling that I get. And we know that feelings drive people to buy, right? So this process of making these value judgments is really important. If you find yourself in the situation where you are no longer able to take price. Now you can use this same model for lots of different, decision bases and decision research. But ideally, what I found is this really works nicely for price. But how do I fill in these boxes? Because these boxes are really important because I not only need to get these from a broad perspective of a large population, but I need depth in each one of those things. We do that through a concept called behavioral AI. And this is the book you're going to get to learn a lot more about behavioral AI. But just so you know, behavioral AI is this idea of using multi-agent systems trained in behavioral psychology to uncover previously unknown human insights. So this is a branch of artificial intelligence that combines large language models, natural language processing, machine learning, and behavioral science to uncover these deep human why insights for market research professionals. Ultimately, that's a lot of words. What I think it's really important that it does is that it is behavioral science trained AI. Now, you may be asking yourself, okay, but what is this multi-agent system? So let's talk a little bit about what a multi-agent system does for you as a marketer or as a marketing researcher. So a multi-agent system, or sometimes it's referred to as MAS, right? It's a computerized system composed of multiple interacting intelligent agents. Now, these multi-agent systems can solve problems that are difficult or impossible for an individual agent or a monolithic system that to solve a whole bunch of terrible words that I no longer want to talk about. So rather than going through this terrible definition of what a multi-agent system is, I want to explain it through the lens of the US Olympics team, gymnastics team, in fact. So I was really inspired this year with the US women's gymnastics team. They won gold. It was an amazing event. But this, to me, feels like the perfect multi-agent system. Why? Well, first off, athletes are agents. Every one of these are athletes. Think of them as an individual agent. And together, they're going to work as a team to solve a very difficult problem. In this case, you're going to win the gold. You're going to be the very best in the world. A very difficult problem for you to solve. Now, there are, in any kind of a gymnastics team, I want you to realize that there are generalists and then there are specialists. And they work together to increase the total score of across all these events to where hopefully they get into the place of maybe they can win gold or silver, right? Now, there are generalists that are on the US Olympics gymnastics team, and they focus really on steady performances because they want to keep the team in the running for gold. So they're very good at very general things, right? So they're going to be really, really good, but they're not really specialists. We want to use the specialists are going to focus on their very strongest events with very, very high difficulty. Why? Because your generalists will get you to kind of the top 5, but it's your specialist that could get you to the silver or the gold. So ultimately, generalists and specialists work together to help reach these near impossible goals. And I believe that in market research today, if we're going to build brands, I believe that that is a very difficult problem to solve in the age of constant options. So that's why I believe that behavioral intelligence or behavioral AI needs to have a multi-agent approach, generalists plus specialists. So let's first talk about our generalist. I like to think of the generalist, my agent number 1, as a brilliant librarian who moonlights as a fiction writer for breadth. This here is the vast, vast, vast majority of research companies out there that are helping or that are using AI to do better marketing research and to write summary reports, right? So think of this as a large language model. This AI agent, like I said, I think she's a brilliant librarian and she's moonlighting as this fiction writer, and she's going to get me breadth of insights. So she's using large language models and maybe some generative AI. So ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. She will serve under my model as the consumer insights generalist who can analyze and sift through vast amounts of conversational data. So she has access, this incredible librarian has access to all sorts of things that are on the internet and all sorts of research that you're getting with your study. So she's going to see patterns and themes and emerging trends that escape the human eye. This is great. Large language models do a great job at doing this. So she's going to provide a broad, high-level insight and summary reports that are written to meet your objectives. Most research companies are using this. They're hiding it behind some sort of a skin. They may have some different things going on, but it's generally using a large language model. So think of what they're doing is these intelligent, brilliant librarians that are really good at writing. However, just like real librarians, these librarians, large language models, have never been trained to delve deeply into the underlying psychological drivers behind consumer behavior. That's why we created the second agent, which is an NLP. So our agent number 2, I like to think of her as this world-class behavioral psychologist and a mathematician, where the AI agent for the librarian is about breadth. The second agent is about depth, really truly understanding human behavior. So that's why we're using NLP models that we've specifically trained in behavioral psychology and mathematics. Now, this is going to serve as this behavioral science specialist. Specifically, she's been trained to interpret deeper psychological meaning when people have conversations, when we're looking at conversational data or even structured data. So she's going to see these behavioral nuances that the librarian or any other large language model would miss because it wasn't trained to become a behavioral psychologist. So she's going to be looking at it through the lens of a mind state. She's going to look at what are the subconscious drivers that I'm picking up through this conversational data, through this structured data. And then she's going to quantify those, which is very unique and different because when you're using an NLP model, I can actually look at the conversational data and see why is the NLP suggesting that this person's driven by achievement. I can actually go to that respondent and look at that, and it tells me the predictive value. It's mathematically based. So I can say, oh, I now see that this person, based upon what they said, they have a high probability of being driven by this motivation. So NLP models, another form of artificial intelligence, is really critical, I believe, at depth and feeling really good about those insights because it's quantitatively based. So they're going to provide, deeper, richer insights that are highly actionable. But here's the problem. She lacks that human client experience that's needed to connect all of these pieces of information. So that's why we have this third agent, this great looking human agent. And this is an experienced client-side market research professional that's going to provide oversight and actionability. When I listen to market research companies say that AI is not going to take your job, I think that if you're doing the first two things, AI is going to take your job. And that makes me sad because I like to think of myself as a behavioral science specialist. However, I know that NLP models and as we train AI agents, number one, they're getting really good at finding these behavioral nuances. So I believe the human agent is going to be really good at connecting all these dots and delivering actionability to clients. Why? Experience. People, real human beings, have experience with lots of different brands and lots of different studies and past experiences that make them who they are. So especially with me, I have 15 years of client-side marketing research experience. So I understand the business problems. I understand what an innovation summit is. I understand what a customer summit is. So I know when we're delivering insights, what that end deliverable needs to look like so you can make it most actionable for you. So what I do, or what the human agent does, is going to link up the specialist with the generalist, make sure everything's running smoothly, and actually push back when I think that those results that maybe one of those two models are pushing doesn't make intuitive sense. So the human agent can still come in there and override artificial intelligence. Ultimately, it's the intuition and the experience that is able to bring all of these two different models together and create a very successful report and a project for you. So that's the way we think about these agents. And why does this matter? Well, because what you can do is if you bring all of these together, we've done that through a new methodology called MindPath. We can bring these agents to apply a very different perspective on the same data set. One perspective is as a generalist using a large language model. The other one is a specialist using the NLP model. And then ultimately, intuition experience. MindPath, doing it this way, all three of us are able to uncover new why insights for your brand. So let me give you a quick example of what this could look like. So remember, we're talking about value. And I was really interested in looking at value perceptions for protein powders. So here's the work that we did. So ultimately, business objective was really to develop a comprehensive understanding of how shoppers psychologically define value when buying protein powders, and then how this impacts their decisions to purchase or abstain from key brands. So the research objectives are basically three, right? Need to understand the conscious and non-conscious factors that are driving protein buying decisions, including we want to understand functional, emotional, and aspirational goals. I'll tell you why that's the case in a second. Next, I want to understand what the core human motivation is behind purchases, because we don't take action unless there's an emotional, motivational purpose to take on that behavior. And what are the key features that we should be focusing on in innovation and communications? Ultimately, I also want to identify differences between brands and possibly even buyer segments that could influence communication strategies moving forward. That helps with actionability. How do I message this brand versus another brand that's trying to take over that part of the equity? Or maybe there's a different segment that I need to message differently, accordingly or differently to. And ultimately, provide actionable recommendations and tactics to regain share. So what I did was I did a study, a mind path study. I'm going to show you some of the key slides and how we did this in just a second, of 300 protein powder buyers. And a mind path incorporates both system 1 and system 2 types of methodologies. So we derive data, we use conversational data, but then there's also just stated data. I think it's a combination of all these that get us to the best insights. We use this multi-agent behavioral insights perspective that I was telling you about. And we did a full report and marketing activation blueprints, which is really important, right? Because what I find is that if you want deep, actual insights, we need to guide those insights using some sort of brand guidelines, right? So we do these things through blueprints, but also what we did was we created a custom behavioral science trade insight specialist so that a person at Muscle Milk could actually use this insight specialist to really deeply understand this research and provide tactical outcomes for the next 10 years if they wanted to. And I'll show you how that works in just a second. So let's just talk quickly about the mind path methodology. We're not going to go into all the depths, but these are the main components of a mind path study. The first thing we want to do is identify those functional goals or jobs to be done. So we use, questioning, right? And we use laddering to do this. So step 1 is let's identify those functional goals or jobs to be done in the category. Then we want to ladder up those goals into emotional and aspirational goals. And so we have respondents actually self-ladder these goals. And we do that actually through audio. Technically, they can type it too. We find that when you let people explain what their goals are, they're much more kind of verbose when they can actually just talk about it and they tell stories. So we do that. If we can let them record themselves, you get much greater data and verbose data that the NLP model, that specialist can use to really derive those deep psychological insights you're looking for. We also have a motivational exercise. It's an image-based exercise that we use to have people select a picture that kind of best expresses how they'd feel if they got everything they wanted in a particular protein powder. And that's important because that's reaching out to those aspirational goals that people have. So of course, then we'd ask them, okay, so you selected this picture. Why did you do that? And lastly, what I wanted to do was create through a max diff exercise, understanding what attitudes and associations people have for brands and those features. So I want to capture those through a max diff so I can determine not only the importance of certain features have on the desire to buy this brand or to buy a protein powder, but also how well the brand is doing on each of those features. And I'll show you a couple of slides here of some of the slides that you would get out of this. Ultimately, through the study, we're also using AI probing. So we can actually, when somebody responds to a question, we can ask, well, why? Tell me more about that. And so we can actually use artificial intelligence in the survey itself to get better probes to help guide kind of that understanding they were looking for through the librarian agent as well as the behavioral psychologist agent. So let me show you a couple of slides that you get out of a mind path study. The first thing what I wanted to do is understand their goals, or you may know this as jobs to be done. Now we look at jobs to be done. There's an expert on, John is an expert on jobs to be done. I'm sure he's on this slide or on this webinar. The way I think about jobs to be done is through 3 different lenses. The normal kind of functional jobs to be done, that's the stuff from Clayton Christensen you've seen for a long time. I also believe that you have to understand that middle box, emotional jobs to be done. Why? Because when you understand emotional jobs to be done, that's where you want to start talking about your product. So when you're speaking to your product, certainly you want to talk about the reasons to believe and the features that you believe, you're advantaged with or that people are seeking. More importantly to me is how do I talk about all of those features collectively? That's the emotional job to be done. So in this case, you can see here that for protein powders, the functional jobs to be done would be, these are basically the categories that you would speak to, right? Great taste, no aftertaste, high protein content, reasonably priced, must be healthy or natural ingredients, and it comes from a trusted or quality-driven brand. Now, those are features that through the NLP would suggest that those are important features that we should be focusing on in our product messaging. But when we talk about the product itself, the entire protein powder, then we want to talk to the emotional job to be done. In this case, it's to help me feel confident that my choices are contributing to my fitness goals and the overall psychological well-being. And and overall well-being. Well-being in this case is not just physical well-being, but psychological well-being. How do I know that? It's because I had people talking and having AI probes. So when you have people talk, they actually resonate with, it makes me feel this way. It makes me more confident. So I know well-being is not just I'm getting more protein, I can build muscle or not lose muscle. It's also how they feel. They feel more confident, more attractive, etc. Now, the reason why I like aspirational goals is that that's where you want to focus your brand positioning or your brand messaging. Why? It's because every time that person has that aspirational goal come to mind, I want them to think about your brand. That's the best place to create brand positioning. It's to relate your brand or associate your brand with people's aspirational goals for themselves, especially in your category. So in this case, the aspirational goal collectively of 300 people would be in the space of to be the best version of myself, healthier, stronger, and mentally sharper. Every time somebody has this idea that comes, it's mostly non-conscious, by the way, that they're thinking, I want to be the best version of myself, healthier, stronger, or sharper. I want Muscle Milk. I want the brand to come to mind. Every time they do that, I want to create a linkage in the associations of the brand with that idea. If I can create strong associations between a brand and somebody's aspirational goals, I have them forever. It's a strong loyalty. People are not loyal to features, and frankly, they're not all that loyal to the emotions you give them. They are very loyal to, are you helping them reach their aspirational goals? That's why I want to do this work around goal theory. It's understanding those features I want to focus on and how do I frame up those features, understanding how do I talk about my product as a whole, and then ultimately, how do I talk about my brand as a whole? And if I can create communications that take all three of those levels in the pyramid, I know that it's been psychologically optimized for incredible engagement. Next, I want to understand is the approach, right? Approach is really helpful in understanding how to lower psychological friction to buying brands. So in this case, protein buyers are optimistic about the category and intuitively focus on positive gains. In this case, about 87% of all respondents are seeking gains from their protein powder, right? 87% want more good things, but there's still 13% of people who are using protein powders to avoid bad things. So I'm using protein powder to avoid loss of muscle, for instance, right? And then we can use, because it's conversational data, I now know what are they most optimistic about? Well, they're most optimistic about convenience of using protein powders. It can be a meal replacement, supporting muscle growth and weight management, or on the things that they're a little bit concerned about, they're a little bit more cautious. Well, protein powders can be pretty costly for a lot of people. There's this misleading marketing. Am I really sure about the sciences and quality concerns? Next, what I want to do is create a motivational mind map. This is one of the new pieces of, or the new ways of explaining a mental model using motivational psychology. So remember, there are 9 core human motivations that drive the vast majority of human behavior. We want to do a mind map for the category first. Why? Because categories come to mind before brands. I have a special need. I'm trying to reach an aspirational goal. A category like protein powders come to mind, but realize that people have different motivations for using that category. In this case, we know that the category over-indexes on desires for success. So I want to feel like an achiever. Remember that mental clarity. I want to feel successful. Those types of comments relate back to the achievement motivation. I want to feel admired, right? Which makes sense because protein powders, hopefully people are going to look fitter, be mentally sharper. So there's this desire for esteem and admiration. And lastly, competent. And the competent was interesting because competent comes down to 2 different things. One is, do I feel like the brand knows what they're doing? Is it a high quality brand? But also, am I doing the right things? Is my diet correct? Am I buying the right brand? Am I using the right workout regime? Or do I have the right diet? So protein powders are also over-indexing on this need for competence. So once you understand the category, the next thing is I want to overlay the brand and what motivations are associated with the brand on top of that. Why? Because if I can get the brand to fit as close as possible to what the category drivers are, I now own category consideration, and brand choice. So I want my brand perceptions to fit as close as possible with the total category motivational drivers. In this case, Muscle Milk does a pretty nice job at success, and they over-index with admiration as well. So I feel pretty good about that. However, around that competency and mastery, there's a low index of a 72. That makes me a little bit nervous. So I now know, okay, if I was to try to create stronger associations with the category drivers, with the aspirational goals that people have for protein powders, I want to start talking a little bit more around how by using Muscle Milk, you're going to be more competent, you're going to be smarter in your decisions, you're going to make great choices for you. And I also want to start talking a lot more about the quality of my product and maybe the associations I have with overall ability to grow muscle, something in that space, right? Because I need to push my brand towards competency. And what you'll also see here is you can also do the same map on competitive brands. So in this case, Dymatize actually fits a lot closer to what the main category drivers are. If you see it, they over-index on success, they over-index on admiration, they over-index on competence, and they over-index on in control, which is the empowerment motivation. So they're a little bit over-indexed there. And I would actually, if I'm thinking as a marketer, I'm thinking, okay, I know that this idea of control is not really driving the category. You see the category is at a 115. So I think you're probably over messaging this idea that you have greater control. It may be useful for differentiation purposes, but if I was you, if I'm running that brand, I'm going to pull back on that messaging, and I'm instead going to push back harder, probably on success, because I want to be the top brand that comes to mind when somebody is driven by the achievement motivation. So I'm probably going to take marketing and push my messaging closer into the success. And then you look at Equate, and poor Equate, right? So Equate, it's interesting. The way I think about the Equate brand from Walmart is that Equate brand is on so many different products, right? That it halos, it has such a strong brand equity that it really doesn't help drive protein powders unless you're looking for security. See how it over indexes on safety, that motivation. My guess is they don't believe that Equate is a safer product. What I believe they mean is I'm not going to overspend. So safety is around cost savings and those comments. The NLP model is picking up on that. Also, you could see being appreciated and cared for, there's a slightly over-index on that association. And belonging, my guess is belonging is Walmart stands for family. So the Equate brand has a whole bunch of different products that is the master brand on. So there's probably some feelings of acceptance and affiliation there. Either way, what I would tell if I was running that Equate brand is say, it may be great that you're building out a brand, but I don't know how it's helping you drive protein powder sales outside of low cost, because you're not really standing for any of the core category drivers. Now, this next map that I like to do is a buyer confidence map. If you're a behavioral economist out here, you may appreciate this. I find it interesting. What I want to do is I want to create buyer confidence. The way I create buyer confidence is I focus on two core cognitive heuristics or cognitive biases. The first one is social proof. So if you look at the vertical axis, you will see social proof. And what I want to do is I believe that the more that you as a customer believe that other people are buying a brand, the more confidence you're going to have in that brand. So what we do is we ask a question. It's kind of a third-party projection question, right? And we just basically ask, what percent of people do you believe are buying this brand when they have a need? You can see it down there at the very bottom. And what you'll do is you find that as people believe that brands are being bought more often, then you're going to go up higher on that. And the second cognitive bias I believe is really critical for establishing confidence is confirmation bias. You guys know confirmation bias is that I am confirming that this is a good choice for me. So rather than asking, do you believe that, which is okay, I like to do a third-party projection there. And I like to also say, out of the people that buy this particular brand, what percent of those people do you believe think it was a good idea for them, that it worked out well for them? You can see the question down at the bottom. And so then I want to know, then what I do is I look at those brands that there's a high percentage of people that believe that, oh, well, yeah, that's a good decision. That was a good decision for that person. So basically you'll see I come up with 4 different quadrants. The bottom left quadrant is what we call lost causes, and brands that fit in that space, that most people reflect on those brands, say not a lot of people are buying them, and I bet those that do buy them question the value of that brand, question how good that brand is. Then I can move up in what we call trendy teasers. Sorry. So brands up there, it's like, oh wow, it's trendy. It looks like a lot of people are buying it, but how good are they really? Like, I don't know how well they're really doing for their customers. Then we can move over to the right over here, and you can see the hidden gems. These brands are brands that people feel like, hey, this is like a brand that I know does a great job. They just haven't really hit their stride yet, and I kind of think it's trendy. It's a hidden. I believe it works really well. It's only a matter of time before other people realize that and they start buying it. Or you can go into the believer brands. That's where you really want to be, because now the perception is not only are a lot of people buying this brand, but those that buy this brand feel really good about that purchase. And what you'll see here is that different brands, of course, are in different places on this map. But here, Pure Protein is out there in that kind of beautiful believer brand. And so I would consider them, at least from a psychological perspective, as a really strong brand to emulate. Now, if I'm Muscle Milk, in my head, I'm thinking to myself, okay, they seem to be on trend because they're probably everywhere. You get them in convenience stores, you see them in grocery stores, you see them at Walmart for sure. They have powders, they have the shakes as well. So they're probably on trend, right? For most people believe that a lot of people, because they see it everywhere, a lot of people are buying. But there's a little bit of apprehension around, does it really work? And since we ask why do they believe that that it doesn't necessarily work for everybody who buys, we can kind of bring into, there's some concerns around taste and digestion, maybe that there's some concerns around many additives and artificial ingredients, and shelf life and allergies. Now I'm going to explain, that's kind of an interesting dynamic, and I'll explain why in just a second. Then lastly, of course, we do a max diff, right? So now what I've done is looking at each one of the possible features. I want to know through max diff how important each of those features are. And then I look at brand performance. How well do you believe that this brand does, or how satisfied are you with this brand at this brand performance? And now I can look at each one of these features that drive the category and see, where does my brand focus, or where's my brand perform related to other brands. So ultimately, then we get to these buying mind states. And what we find is that there are 3 core three core mind states that drive category consideration and brand choice, right? Drive people to actually to buy protein powders. And so if you understand these mind states, in this case, the number 1 mind state is optimistic achievement mind state. Or if you also understand that you want to drive esteem associations using the optimistic esteem mind state, you now know how to craft up new brand messaging and your innovations so you can tap into these mind states. These mind states are really, really important, because when you tap into somebody's mind state with your communications, with your brand messaging, you drive emotional arousal. You get greater, deeper connections with your brand. Ultimately, you're able to build that brand, higher profitability, and actually charge more for that brand. So let's talk about the value perceptions. Ultimately, if you want to increase perceptions with Muscle Milk, to increase value perceptions with Muscle Milk, create a new anchor. Remember, in the first 1/20th of a second, there's an initial anchor. In this case, that initial anchor, there's a little bit of an avoidance response we found in this with this initial anchor. So within the first 1/20th of a second, it's not a horrible avoidance response, but there is this idea of powdered milk comes to mind. Because a lot of people look at Muscle Milk and still think, is it dairy-based? So people think, oh, if it's dairy-based, then you're using dry milk. So the associations people have with dried milk or powdered milk is there's taste concerns, there's additives, because you're adding something to this. There are concerns around shelf life, and I think that's because of associations with milk, and also allergens, lactose intolerance, things like that. So realizing that the brand initially is being anchored against powdered milk. If I'm on the Muscle Milk team, I need to create a new initial anchor to avoid that avoidance response, to lower that avoidance response. Then as it relates to encoding, I want to tap into the optimistic achievement mind state and the optimistic esteem mind state, using those different mind states to actually message so that they encode my brand around this idea of helping you feel confident that your choices are contributing to fitness goals and overall well-being, the aspirational goals that I told you about. So how do you want to be thought of? This is where I'm going to go to the optimistic esteem mind state and the optimistic achievement mind state. Ultimately, getting into, if I can do this really well, if I can create a new anchor that is more of an approach, make somebody want to learn more and want to kind of engage with the brand, and the brand stands for helping you to reach that aspirational goal, you're going to have a much stronger feelings for your brand. In this case, the subjective value that is felt. So I've been up here for a long time talking about the importance of blueprints, because if you want true actionability, you better be able to come back to your brand as a market research professional and saying, here's what we're going to do. We have these great insights, hopefully, but here's what we want to do. And what we do is we use activation blueprints. So an activation blueprint is combined, it combines a psychological profile with marketing blueprints. So with this study, we created 2 different activation blueprints, one for the optimistic achievement mind state and another for the optimistic competence mind state. We have talked about blueprints in probably the last 4 or 5 webinars that I've done, so I'm not going to talk through them right now. You can see a couple of the slides here that you get with a blueprint, but just to remind you, in any blueprint you're going to get a persona overlay. So basically understanding the mind state characteristics that somebody is under when they're making a decision for your category. You're going to understand, or you're going to get a personality profile. I use the Ocean personality profile. So to understand the kind of a more of a personality profile of your key shopper groups, but you're also going to understand goals and motivations, regulatory approach, those cognitive heuristics that we talk about a lot, or what we call triggers. You're going to see the feelings that you want to evoke in your messaging. You're going to also understand the brand archetype that your buyers are hoping for when they make a decision in your category. You're going to understand a lot more around what your brand personality should be, as well as your positioning, and at least guidance around that. You're going to get content strategy, visual and copy guidance, customer experience, user experience, innovation guidelines, etc. So these blueprints, about 20 pages. If you want to learn more, if you want to know more about it, go to mindstategroup.com/resources, or you can just look at the resources tab, and then you can just download a blueprint, right? It's a standard blueprint. But if you want to understand, okay, if I did a piece of research with Mindstate Group, and what do I get out of it? You're going to see at least one blueprint you can download. So I believe that those are really, really important in helping you as a market researcher make sure that your insights are incredibly actionable. However, we start thinking to ourselves, like, what can we do to take it to the next level? What could we do to where, insights are not just shelved? I was in your spot. I worked at PepsiCo for a number of years and in biotech, et cetera. And I know that when you do a great piece of research, even if it's like a segmentation, after a couple of months, it just goes away. Like, people move on to the next thing. Your brand teams forget. They put that piece of research up on a shelf and they don't use that research. And that's been a big issue with actionability. And I've tried lots of different ways, like blueprints and one-pagers. So you could always keep a one-pager in your folder so that when you're in a meeting and you really want to understand, or if you want to evaluate an idea based upon the consumer, then you would have a objective-based customer voice. And I think that works pretty well. However, if you're going to take this to the next level, I would consider now using behavioral AI to get much more advanced actionability. And we can do that by creating a behavioral science trade specialist. So let's talk about the way to think about AI. So the way I think about AI is that there are 2 different types of AI. You have synthesis AI, which means artificial intelligence that's going to aggregate and summarize data. Right. So this is the classic AI that's going to look through all your verbatims. It's going to look through all of your data that you have out there. And that's kind of like the librarian that I talked about. It's going to do a pretty good job at that. And then you have generative AI. Your generative AI is going to generate reports and recommendations. Again, this is the vast majority of artificial intelligence that's being used in the market research place today. And they're good. I have no doubt they're good. There's better versions and other versions. And some people talk about different models, but this is fine. The problem is, this is the librarian analogy I told you again about. It can pick up patterns, but they don't truly understand human behavior. If you have seen out on LinkedIn or other times when you've used some of these platforms and you're thinking to yourself, these are pretty good research findings, but I don't feel like they're great insights. Like, I don't understand the real why. I would suggest that what you need to do is think about using a behavioral science intelligence layer. So imagine if You're using artificial intelligence to synthesize research, right? But it's being pushed through a behavioral science intelligence layer. In this case, that mind path, right? The three agents. You have your librarian, you also have your behavioral psychologist, and you have your research expert. What if your synthesis AI was being pushed through that? Well, now you wouldn't just be synthesizing data, you would have a deeper psychological understanding of consumer behavior. And when that write-up comes to you, when the platform you're using or the insights company that you're using is doing generative AI to create your research reports so that they're faster, and I totally get why you do that. But what if that was being pushed also through a behavioral science intelligence layer? So it's going through the librarian, the cognitive psychologist, behavioral psychologist, and the insights professional. Now, rather than getting findings, you're going to get psychological optimization of your generated outputs. And those outputs, if you're in market research, could be certainly better research reports. But I'm more interested in thinking of, okay, if I'm sitting in a meeting and we're starting to come up with product ideas for Muscle Milk, I want to have the ability to right there in the moment use generative AI that has been pushed through a behavioral science intelligence layer to give me better ideas that I know will map back to the research findings. So I want to do ideations using this. I want to do activation ideas. When I see copy, I'm about to do a copy test or a product test. I want to look at that copy and think to myself, what if I rewrote that copy so that I knew that it was optimized to tap into the mind state that I uncovered in the research? Therefore, my product test, my advertising testing has a much stronger kind of copy that's behind it and more likely to get an honest result of whether the idea is good or not. So I'm thinking about the outputs could be packaging concepts before testing, innovation concepts, activations, in-store messaging, etc. So when I'm thinking about generative, what if we could actually push this stuff through this intelligence layer? And this is what we did for them. So what we do is we call this Mindstate GPT. But really what I'm trying to do for clients now is when we do a piece of research using MindPath, a deliverable would be your own custom behavioral science trained research specialist. So let me show you basically what we did here. What we do is we take not only your research results from a MindPath study, but we also have trained our GPT to be trained on my book, Marketing Mindstates, plus about 10 years worth of academic studies, as well as our own research. So it's got 10 years of cognitive psychology built into this GPT. It's also got the blueprints for your study. So remember that your research study get these blueprints. So we train the GPT on those blueprints. So in this case, it was optimistic achievement and optimistic esteem. Then what we also can do is take your brand guidelines or your brand assets. That could be maybe your brand overview, and that's what we did in this case, and growth strategy, your style guide, your content strategy, and even market trends. So imagine that I'm training this custom GPT not only on your research, but also on behavioral science and behavioral psychology, the Mindstate model incorporated into that. So it's got my book that it's been trained on and all the content that I've written for the last 10 years, but also your own brand guidelines. Put all this stuff together, and now you have access as your brand, you're the brand researcher there, you have access to this GPT where you can ask questions. So let me show you what this is going to look like. Give me just a second. I'll have to opt out. I'm going to get out of this view, and then I'm going to come into the other view. So give me just a second. And this is what it could look like. So this would be for Muscle Milk, the Muscle Milk Behavioral Insights Specialist. So ask me anything about Muscle Milk Consumer and I got your back. Now realize that you could take not just our reports, but frankly, you could take other pieces of research. Maybe you have a segmentation in there. Maybe you have some sort of an overall profile that's for the whole brand. You could drop it in this as well. But for this case, let's just see, ask me what I can do with this Muscle Milk behavioral science or this GPT. So let's just see what it says. I guess I prefer response 1. So you can see here, it's taking the information from the research as well as the brand guidelines. It's telling you, here's how you could use this, right? So in this case, there's strategic brand positioning. You can use it for content development and innovation. You can use it for market insights and segmentation. Here's what I love: behavioral science driven campaigns. When I was in your shoes and I'm running, like I ran the Sunchips brand insights team for a while, when the Sunchips brand would come and say, we've got this new campaign, I could actually integrate that my marketing to Mindstates model into that now very easily through a custom GPT. You could look at the world through product experience and optimization. You could also use this GPT for collaboration and ideation. So let's see what the other response could have been too. On-brand communication, marketing innovations, market research reviews. What if with this GPT, you could take another piece of market research, run it through it, so it would look at that research through the lens of Mindstates. So you could take somebody else's piece of research and see if there's any behavioral psychology elements in that research. Maybe you did a concept test, or maybe you did some package testing, and see how those research results marry back to the psychological Mindstates that you uncovered in a MindPath piece of research. So behavioral science application. So let's just say here, I'm sitting here, I'm in a meeting, and I hear that we're going to do some ideation based on these results. So let's just type it in here. Hopefully this does something good. So I'm going to say, what are some new products or new product ideas that would fit the two mind states uncovered in the research? Let me change that. And let's see what it comes up with. So remember, we have two different mind states. Here's some different product ideas that align with these mind states. And it will even do it by mind state. So in this case, it's saying there's some momentum boost protein powders, recovery 19 protein powders. It'll give you the concept idea in this case and why it fits, right? So you can feel a little bit better about your product ideation. Here's some for your optimistic esteem mind state, etc. So that can help you in ideation. But what happens if maybe your boss is asking you, hey, what are the key findings you got out of this MindPath study? So you could write that in there. You could go to this agent and say, my boss needs a one-pager of the research. And let's see. So here it is. It's giving you a quick one-pager. So just like with any generative AI tool, you can interact with this, not just to generate concept, but you can actually run ideas past it and say, what if the innovation team wants to create a lower protein version of muscle milk? Would this be a good idea? And it will go back to everything it knows about the brand, all the research that's inside of that library, and it'll tell you, I believe, based upon what I know, it's a good idea, not a good idea, and why. So that's the idea of the importance of using this. You could actually use this behavioral science GPT. You could actually give this to your brand teams if you wanted to, so they could actually, ask questions of it. You can actually ask questions of it. You'd always have it in your bucket. You could sit there and look on your phone and use this thing and get to a place where you actually have this behavioral science assistant always ready to answer any question you have, help you ideate, help you write emails for you, etc. If you want to learn more about MindPath, reach out to me at mindstategroup.com. That's my website. You can actually use a link there to schedule a meeting, or just email me at will.leach@mindstategroup.com. You know my email because I've been sending you emails for you to get on this platform. So just email me and we'll just talk about whether or not this makes sense for what you are trying to do with your brand in 2025 and whether it makes sense at this time. So thanks a lot again. I appreciate you guys coming here. Have a great holiday, and hopefully we will see you in 2025. Take care.